Hey guys, Toolman Tim here. Welcome back to the workshop where we create community, find freedom, promote preparedness, and share success. It's Sunday night, which means it's time for another edition of the Workshop Podcast. And of course, we're here live. And tonight I've got Buddy Lindsey from Bud DIY here. But real quick, before we bring him on, a couple of pieces of housekeeping to get out of the way. First off, I kind of filled you guys in a little bit on Thursday, but going forward in December from around the 9th, I'm going to be away for a week. I got to go out east to visit with some family. And so for about 2 weeks over the Christmas, New Year's holiday, we're going to kind of shut things down a bit. Doesn't mean that there won't be any content. There'll just be a little bit less content. There'll be some pre-recorded podcasts, a couple of videos, but there'll actually be about 2 weeks where there won't be any new videos. So I've been 2 years straight doing this, and I decided, hey, I'm going to take 2 weeks off at Christmas and enjoy it. And with this thing going out and checking on my dad, I figured it was the best time to kind of implement it. Doesn't mean, however, over the holidays that we won't do 1 or 2 impromptu live streams anyway. I'm sure I kind of will. And one thing I might like to do is have one where we can get some community members come on, because we can have up to 6 on the StreamYard live stream. I thought maybe we do something absolutely outside the box. Maybe talk about our favorite Christmas movies, maybe our favorite prepper movies, who knows? But anyway, so if there's any interest in that, throw that at me on the comments and anywhere on social media. I'd love to have you on. I can't promise when it'll be, but it's something I just love to do over the holidays to kind of have some fun. And, oh, evening, Cormac. Nice to see you. And one more quick thing. Thursday night, of course, is going to be episode 3 of Preparedness. And this week, we're going to be dealing with how to get ourselves out of a shitty situation. And what I mean by that is how to fix sewer problems, plumbing, drainage problems, anything like that, stuff to keep on hand, the tools to have, the skills to have, and the whole rest of that. And of course, you guys know the Thursday night live stream is also simulcast on the Prepper Broadcast Network, which has been a huge growth to our community. So I'm thankful to James who invited me to be part of that. So if you guys want to check that out, same bat time, same bat channel right here, or on PBN as well. So with that, let's bring Buddy on. Give me 1 second. Hey Buddy, how are you?
Hey, good. Yourself?
Perfect. Good. So how you been?
Been good. Been busy. Got done
right
with
on.
my podcast about an hour ago, so jumping on this one.
Oh, and there's some congratulations in order, guys. I think Buddy just hit the century mark, didn't you?
Yep. Today was my 101st episode. So it was about replacing a sink and a vanity in my house. So dealing with plumbing.
Right on. So tell us exactly, who is Buddy? Tell me your story, Buddy. Where'd you come from? What are you up to?
Yeah. So I, let's see where to start. I grew up in a suburb. I feel like that's important in my life setup. I grew up in a suburb. Life was kind of designed in a sense around growing up in a suburb, learning in a small school, going out and getting a job somewhere, and just doing the typical American thing. I think one of the things that broke me out of that a little bit was scouting. We were super involved in Boy Scouts and eventually got Eagle, and just kind of went on from there. And I was like, kind of from that, I determined that I'm not a typical person and I don't do things the normal way. And my wife and my mom can attest to that very much. Ended up deciding I do not like manual labor. I don't like mowing the lawn. I don't like doing DIY projects. I don't like any of this stuff that my dad did all the time and would try to get me to help do, get frustrated and just finish it for me. I might have done that on purpose a few times. But I just decided I did not like any of that. And I'm going to get a career that I don't have to do any of it because, and I want to pay people to do that kind of work for me. And so with that in mind, I became a software engineer, and I like computers. My best friend was into computers. We're both now software developers, have been for, I've been playing with code for 20 years now. A professional developer for 10, so that was kind of my world, and kind of went that direction, and had to have a lot of fun. I really do enjoy my job and I love what I do, but that was the kind of the direction that life went. somewhere along the way, I got my degree. It took 13 years, a lot of evening classes. Again, I don't do things the typical way. And along the way, decided, I don't like living in cities. I don't like living in the suburbs. Everything is cramped. I enjoyed being out in the woods. When I think of camping, I think of camping in Boy Scouts when we went once a month for a weekend, and it was primitive camping. It wasn't, little pad spots on the lake. I mean, we were out in the woods, and you brought in your own water and you brought in your own food and all of that. And so to me, being out in the woods is a lot of fun, and doing stuff constantly outside. And I think that gets me to I like to constantly be doing stuff side, along with the ADD that I have. And so, anyway, so I just like, that's kind of what led me to the direction I am now and where I am now. I think that kind of naturally translates to, if I didn't like DIY growing up, why in the world am I doing DIY now? Why do I have a channel dedicated to DIY? Why am I doing a podcast dedicated to DIY? That's kind of strange. And so I don't know if you want me to go into that or not.
Go for it. That took the question right out of my mouth. So yeah, you go.
Okay.
Hey, I'll sit back and have a nap. You go ahead. I'm good.
Okay. You could tell I do this. You could tell I talk about this a lot. And
that's awesome. No, go for it. I'd love to hear.
So for one, I'm frugal. I mean, we grew up, we didn't have a lot of money. We always had enough. And I'm sure like most people, and I never really felt like we were poor or anything, and we weren't, but we weren't rich either. There was always that debate, like, do we buy it or build it or source it or what, like, or do we just do without? I mean, typical family. And so I've always been frugal. And my parents had money problems. And so I was, part of the job is, to get a good job so I don't have money problems. But I always assess like value of stuff, and I always assess cost. And I hate spending money on stuff in general because of that. Now, don't get me wrong, I like stuff. And my hobbies attest to that. But I also like value. And probably 3 or 4 years ago, my wife was like, we need a cube system to store all the stuff that we have for our kids. Cause, like, we're going to be the only grandkids on either side of my family. I have no siblings.
Wow.
Yeah. My wife has 2 siblings that are never going to have kids. I mean, unless one of them just accidentally does at this point. And so our kids get spoiled to death from the grandparents, and so like we'll buy a few toys because we know the grandparents are going to buy all the rest. And so that's what happened. And so our house was littered with toys, and my wife was like, we need to organize this. And so she's like, we need to go to IKEA and buy a cube system. And IKEA is interesting to look at. I hate the quality of their stuff. Like I had never been until I married my wife, and
that's the story of every man's life. I think I could be wrong, but
probably, yeah. And so after I had gone to IKEA, I'm like, oh, this is interesting. I think we bought a couple of things that were just randomness. I mean, they weren't necessarily bad, but it was like, I was not impressed with the quality of it. And I'm like, I've only dabbled at woodworking growing up because my dad was like, here, I need you to hold the flashlight meme, that, think about that, that's kind of where, the background I come from. And so I never really, got to do a whole lot. I played with a lot of things, and my dad was like, you're going to learn how to do this today. And so I did it once, kind of thing. And so I'm like, I feel like I can make a better cube system than IKEA, quality wise and long lasting, than IKEA. Theirs probably goes to bed. Theirs would go together faster because it's highly engineered, highly designed, and I'm some dude in my shop. And so that got me going down like, well, what does it take to make a cube system? And I kind of, the rest, as they say, is history. That, evolved into me doing more DIY. My wife jokes all the time. She likes to restore furniture, and she's like, why couldn't you have gotten into all this DIY stuff before we have kids? Because now I can't help you outside until our kids are a little bit older. So
that's funny. Yeah. Anybody who's been on this channel for a while knows that I'm The bane of my existence is IKEA. I don't enjoy going there, the
Mhm.
way the store is lined up. And I was putting a set together one day, and I forget, it was just a heavy tool, and I
Mhm.
kind of had the frame of a dresser set, and
Mhm.
the tool fell down and broke every single piece all the way through. So it's made to be fine once it's put together. But
Mhm.
so we're going to dig in further about, a lot of your other stuff. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, you said, you like stuff like I do, but I noticed I was kind of skimming around earlier. And tell me a little bit about your Delta Unisaw restoration. Was that a bit of a project you did?
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. That was an introduction into DIY, in a sense of like, here's your first project, and not too complicated, not too but bigger, because I up to that point I'd never done that. I'd talked about doing stuff. I helped my dad with a carburetor growing up. I had um joined two angle iron pieces of metal together a few times, to make a makeshift desk. It was terrible. And I'd done little things here and there, but nothing ever serious and nothing that ever mattered. And so when I decided to get into doing the DIY stuff, specifically to do the cube system, because all I really want to do is a cube system,
Mhm.
I went out and looked at the old Craftsman table saw that I inherited from my grandpa, and like, I was just having all kinds of problems figuring out what was going wrong with it. I was just having problems cutting boards. I didn't know what those problems were. Now, in all likelihood, my main problem, looking back, was just a dull blade, but I didn't know
Sure.
that. I thought it was something wrong with the table saw. And so I was like, well, we need to buy a new table saw because stuff. And so I started researching and researching. And after eh, one thing about me, the personality that I have, the value type personality that I have, is I research the crap out of everything. I literally spent a year and a half researching chickens before I got chickens, and like, I knew everything about chickens almost before I got one. Didn't need to know
Mhm.
all that, but that's just how I do things. And so I landed on a DeWalt contractor saw for like $500, $600 area. And I was like, that's the one I'm going to get. So I mentioned it to my father-in-law, and he's like, well, the government does these auctions every now and then. And sometimes schools sell tools, and, because they want to get rid of all the old stuff. And so, um, the technical school about an hour away just happened like a week later to throw up tons of their stuff, and there was a Powermatic, um 3 horsepower, or no, this is a 5 horsepower Powermatic table saw. Like, this was the cream of the crop
That's
table
awesome.
saw. This is the one that everyone, the one that everyone drools over.
Mhm.
So they had that, and started out on the auction at like $200. And I'm just like, whoa. Uh, and so we went down and looked at it, and it looked awesome. We just happened to see the Delta table saw off to the side. They were selling that too, but they didn't get a good picture of what it was. So when we saw it down there, we're like, okay, if we can get the Powermatic, that would be cool. We doubt that'll ever happen. And we put like a $500 or $600 maximum on the Unisaw, and ended up winning it and a few other tools.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I got that, and it was like, great, you have a table saw. Now you need to figure out how it works. And so figured the first thing I needed to do was clean it up. And I was like, well, if I'm going to clean it up, let's do it right. And so I tore off every bolt, everything, replaced the pulleys, cleaned everything up. I got some chemical cleaner thing and washed every single part I could wash, scrubbed it down. I got impatient, so I didn't paint it all back together. But you know, uh, I find when it comes to painting, I don't have the patience, so I tend to just finish the project. And so I took apart, I filmed and took pictures of everything, um, because I knew it was going to take a while.
Mhm.
And so then I could just basically watch the video and do it in reverse. And it worked, and I put it back together and it worked. My father-in-law is an electrician, so he was able to get a VFD hooked up with 3-phase to do single phase to 3-phase conversion, since it was a 3-phase table saw. And we actually still have that. I have that VFD still hooked up in the shop, even though I don't use the unisaw anymore, in case I ever get any other 3-phase equipment. So anyway, yeah, so that's kind of the story of the unisaw.
I'm sure we'll meet someday in real life, because I just listening to your different stories and things over the last while, I think we got quite a bit in common. I mentioned earlier before we come on live here about the idea of a modern Renaissance man. And it's funny that you mentioned ADD, because I don't know. I don't think I necessarily ever had it or have it, but I talked to a guy a couple days ago, and I was explaining to him that I learn a lot like you, research the hell out of something, dive right into it, learn something, and then move on to the next something. And I've done that my whole life. And then of course I dropped my old habits like a bad habit. And he says, you probably get ADD. I said, I don't know, maybe, but either way, that mindset's incredible. And I love hearing how other people take their time, how your learning process and your step, like when I was listening to you talk about taking that saw together and learning ahead of time first, because people always ask, well, why don't you do many negative reviews on products? And simply because I research the heck out of them before I ever buy them. And so I rarely ever make a bad purchase, because I know what I need. Right. So that kind of, anyway, but and I've been watching you on Instagram and different things, and you've taken quite a little, I don't want to say detour, but a pretty cool path. You took a full-on welding course lately, didn't you?
Yes. Yep.
Tell me about that. It looks really cool.
Yeah. So doing the woodworking. So I got into woodworking. I really enjoy woodworking. But I watched a guy, Matt Cremona, on YouTube, and he's a woodworker. But he lives up in Minnesota, and up there they have giant trees. And he actually got into milling his own wood. Urban logging is kind of what he does. And it's where go into urban settings, get the logs that people cut down in their yards, and he goes and takes them, mills them, and then turns them into furniture and other stuff, and sells the slabs, makes some money, and that kind of stuff. And he made the comment on one of his podcasts of how do you put it? He's like, I don't have a problem of which wood do you use. I have the problem of which tree do I use, and for the project. So he designs his woodworking projects around it based on how much of a tree he has, so he can make the entire project with one tree. So it all has a consistent look and feel and everything. And he can say, this tree turned into this thing. And I'm like, that is the coolest thing ever. How much is a sawmill? $50,000. I do not want a sawmill anymore, kind of thing. But at the same time, he built his own sawmill. Now, he built a 70-inch wide sawmill for his, thing. So he can do 70-inch wide cuts, and it's like 8 feet tall, really custom job. This thing would be an $80,000, $90,000 sawmill if he were to go buy one. And he built it for like 10, 15 grand. And so I was like, that's interesting. And so I started researching building your own sawmill. And I'm like, that's actually not that. Saw one person in a sawmill building group built one for $200 because he was resourceful with barter and scrap yards and people's backyards. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that guy's thing. But if I can get between, if I can only spend $2,000 or $3,000 and I can get a sawmill, I can do the same thing. We have some family land. I can go harvest a few trees off of there, and I can make some really neat projects. One particular one, we have this really big honey locust, and my grandma wants it gone, and we want it gone because because there's little stickers in there, man, they're not fun. And however, the core of it is just a beautiful yellow. We're only imagining it's a beautiful yellow because when we cut limbs off, it's really cool and yellow, and it'll eventually brown. But I think it would be really cool to make some stuff out of that. And so one of the things I want to do is build a sawmill. And so I was like, well, I need to learn to weld. my welding experience is not that far in a sense. You know, I have some bubble gum welds. I built a bumper for a Jeep. It fell apart. The bumper, not the Jeep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so obviously I don't know what I'm doing. And as an aside to this, I'm also a youth pastor with my wife. And
Nice.
one of our youth was like, hey, he graduated and was just like, he's working at the local grocery store. And it's like, are you going to do anything? You know, like, what are the plans, you know? And, and he's like, well, I'd like to get into welding. And it's like, well, have you taken a welding class? You know, have you looked at how to get a welding job? No, not really. And so I offhandedly said, well, our local tech school has a night welding class. I'll take it if you take it. And fortunately, he jumped on that. And so I got signed up for an 8-week welding class that was 2 nights a week for 3 hours a night. And the cool thing about it was kind of a feet first, you know, after the first night of the safety stuff, then it was basically every night after that, you're spending about 2.5 hours of just welding and all the things around welding. You know, there was next to no class time. And if you ran into a problem, he would sit there and just walk you through it, you know, one-on-one. But for the most part, you were sitting there burning rod. And so you just, anyway, and he would also individualize the class to what your needs are. And I was like, I want to build this, and showed him a picture of a sawmill. And he was like, okay. And by the end of it, he's like, you can build a sawmill and it'll stay together. And so I was really cool. And I liken it to, I probably got for $250 for the class, and that 8 weeks, probably 2 years or more worth of DIY experience welding. And I just have a lot of experience welding now, and it was a lot of fun. So that's kind of the history on the welding thing. And I've done a couple of things since then, and I was like, wow, that's a great experience, because my dad was like, hey, I have this pipe, can you weld it? And I'm like, well, I'm not a pipeline welder, but I'll give it a shot. And pulled out some, I think it was some 7018 rod, and he kind of sprung it on me. So he has a really old helmet that I'm not using. I have a really nice auto darkening, you know, super big, you know, frame there, and his is like, you know, and the thing is loose, and I'm like, I got something done, but I was like, I don't feel like this is the quality that I can actually do. And so at that moment, I had the revelation, like, I have a quality that I can go to now. So that is awesome. And as for Dan W., I'm from Oklahoma, so right smack in the middle of the United States.
I was gonna say, you don't have not a real thick accent, you know. It's kind of I don't know, is it Midwestern? Is that what they call it, or Central? What are they? I don't even.
It depends on who you talk to in my area. Some can be a little Midwestern, more Southern though is what it usually is. But my wife and I mean, if you listen to old videos of my wife when she was a kid, she has a really strong Southern accent, like hick Southern accent. And I don't know, I guess you just kind of grow out of it as you learn to talk more, and you read more and you listen to other stuff. And I don't know, I had a little bit of one, but I've kind of grown out of it as I've gotten older. So.
I grew up in Nova Scotia, and it's there is a very thick accent. And like I said, I'm heading home in about 10 days, and I'll be around everybody out there for about 10 days. I can just imagine what my first couple of recordings are going to sound like when I come back, because all of a sudden it speeds up and every word rolls into the next. Oh yeah, it's something else. But so you're the type of guy that if you wanted to buy a sawmill, instead of buying one, you're going to go out and damn well learn how to weld and then assemble the sawmill. And then, I seriously dig that. I love that mindset.
Yep. Yeah. I bought plans online from several different places, and watched a bunch of YouTube videos of different designs. And I have most of a design in my head. There's still a few things to figure out. I actually have a textbook that I bought on hydraulics, so that I can learn about doing hydraulics, for doing some of the stuff, because I'm like, you know, I don't want to lift up these logs all the time. But I saw on a Woodmiser sawmill that they have this huge hydraulic arm that just kind of picks it up and pushes it on the tab. And I'm like, I want to build that. And then I saw on another one, they have a hydraulic feed for the whole thing. And I'm like, I want to learn how to do that too. So
I'll
bought a book on hydraulics.
We got a guy in the workshop community named Ken Cornelius, and he lives up on a mountain all by him, well, with his wife, like they're, and he's into sawmilling. So I'll have to get him hooked up with you. You guys can compare notes because he's been doing it for years. He's a smart dude. So,
Gotcha.
And do you know Brian from the Lots Project? Do you know the Lots Project at all? Anyway, no, him and his wife Corey, they're in the process of putting together an off-grid RV and traveling the countryside. Nice. But he wants to know, stick welding or wire feed too?
Both. So the guy, the instructor, since it was a night class, it was actually a professional welder, and he's been welding for 30 years and works for Tinker Air Force Base. And he basically came in and was like, if you can weld stick, you can weld anything. So we're going to start with stick. And so we went into stick, and he kind of has his core little, like, what he wants you to do. He wants to use, I think, 70-13 rod and 70-18, 60-13 and 70-18. I think anyway, I don't remember too much off the top of my head. But he's like, he wanted you to get through a bunch of test stuff like that. And then once you got done with that, he would start customizing things. And as soon as I got through that, in the first 5 weeks, I went on to MIG welding for the last few weeks, last 2.5 weeks. And then we did torch and plasma cutting the last couple of nights. So we can know how to do that. Yeah. So
I mean, I'm no expert, but the welds you put on Instagram and stuff, they look pretty darn good to me.
Yeah, those were all the good end ones. I didn't show any of the bad first ones.
Joseph here, he's from Millis Construction. He's got a pretty big YouTube channel. He's from Oklahoma, and also a handyman and everything else. But says that's my welding instructor told us as well. If you can weld stick, then you can do wire feed, no problem. So
yeah,
that makes sense.
What's funny is the holding of the MIG welder versus the stick welder, like, kind of threw me at first, because like you kind of drag the stick in a sense. And so I tried to do that with MIG welding, and it worked, but I couldn't see the puddle very well, or like just how I was doing it. I don't know. It was just weird. And so, or no, I couldn't see where I was going. I saw the puddle really well. I couldn't see where I was going. And so I was going up and down, up and down, up and down the joint. And so, at one point we were done an hour early, and with like the stuff. And he's like, I don't want you to really start. Just do some stuff and figure things, just go experiment. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, well, the biggest thing I need to work on is restarting a weld, and then pushing forward with the MIG. And after about an hour of practice, I was being dumb and practicing literally both at the same time, instead of one and then the other. But after the hour, I was doing both pretty well. And now most of my MIG welding is pushing the thing so I can see where I'm going. Now my face is like almost in the puddle, I feel like, but I can do it.
Hey, that's what they got protection for, right?
Right.
So now you're officially a woodworker and a metalworker. So which one do you like better?
In the end, I honestly think I like woodworking better.
Okay.
There are things that I like about metalworking, but and you can do some really cool looking projects, but to me, some of the beautiful projects are all woodworking projects that I've seen. I like when you get the nice curl on there and the nice shapes that you can do, and you can some of the bends that you can do just right. And I don't know, like, to me, it's funny because growing up, my dad did woodworking. He never got into it like I do it. He did it all as a practical thing. All practical projects, handyman projects, and where I'm getting into it more in the furniture side and the kind of the craft side. Growing up, much like the DIY, I was like, I don't like wood furniture. I don't like woodworking. I'd want to do metalworking. And, God has an awesome way of making you eat your own words. Because now it's like, getting into woodworking, it's so much fun. There's a lot of things I didn't realize about it. And now it's like I prefer woodworking to metalworking, and now I can do both in reality. And I can combine both of those things together and make better projects.
Brian says metalworking is much more forgiving than woodworking.
Yes.
Do you agree?
I from so far, like I can add some metal back if I kind of mess a few things up. It's a little harder to do that with wood. Now I've been researching machining like doing like a Bridgeport, a manual mill machine, and like that stuff is super interesting as well. There's a couple channels that I watch that this guy does some really cool projects with his manual milling machine, and I'm like, I kind of would like to get one of those someday and do some projects. Fortunately, my father-in-law has a bunch of equipment, and he has a bench top manual milling machine, so it'll do some smaller stuff, and then he also has a metal lathe, a smaller metal lathe. And so I can actually use both of those to help with the sawmill build project. And so I'm really looking forward to diving into that. But, it's just some really cool stuff that you can build with that, and kind of looking forward to. There's another woodworker, Almfab, I think is his YouTube channel. And he's an inventor. I think first. And so he created this bench vise that has a bunch of gears on it. So you push it in, and instead of like a thread through the center to pull it in, it's actually geared. So you close the thing on both sides at the exact same rate of speed. And it also has multiple settings. So you can go in really fast and out really fast. And so he designed that. It's a little expensive, but he designed it, sells it. But he just came out with this new thing that he put out as he's like, here's what I built, and here is anyone interested in buying this, because they're going to be expensive, but they're fasteners. But he used a really,
are they hidden fasteners?
Yes. Yeah.
I just seen that. I don't know how I see. Anyway, keep going. Sorry. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. He designed a thing where, like, right in the center, it's kind of this custom cutout, kind of like a Phillips head, but not really. And if you poke at it with your finger, you can see it depresses. But if you get within like a foot of it, or even closer, you can't tell that there's a seam there where the metal is. And so now that adds for some really, really cool projects that you can do. With exposed fasteners that look like an art piece on it. And so I think that's kind of a fun way to bring in some metalworking into kind of woodworking, combine the two to do some really interesting projects. So
that would be cool. Yeah.
I was gonna say that particular thing is not my style of wood furniture. I like the more shaker style, kind of more Windsor and traditional woodworking stuff. I'm definitely not mid-century modern. One of the places I worked, they're big into mid-century modern, and I'm like, I feel like I've gone back to my grandma's house. It just wasn't my thing. I'd like to live in a cabin in the woods. My walls are green, for peace sake.
Yep.
So
I love it. Yeah, those were neat. I think he was kind of gauging interest, almost like kind of like a Kickstarter almost,
yeah. And he had like a multi-step challenge for you to actually show how interested you were in it.
Yeah, because I think he'd mentioned, you see this quite often, they creators put out these project ideas and they're like, hey, who's interested? And 100 people put their hand up, but then when it comes time to actually order or put your money where your mouth is, maybe one out of those 100 do, right? So yeah, it was. Oh, Ken, do you know Kenneth Ish at all? Or Ash? I'm sorry, Ken, if I mispronounced your last name, but he's got at least one podcast, maybe a couple. I can't. It's hard to keep track of everybody, but
his avatar looks really familiar. I'm bad with names, unfortunately.
That's okay. Another feller from the TSP community. So
that's probably it. Yeah.
So, what's your favorite type of woodworking project?
It's more contextual, I guess. I mean, I enjoy the design process. I enjoy getting in and designing it, and then going out and working on it. My biggest project is a bunk bed, or a loft bed that I did with stairs that were also the dressers for my daughter. And And so that's cabinetry and, more traditional, woodworking, furniture side, combined into one, and they both had their fun parts to them. And so I really enjoyed that. I want to build a set of cabinets in my office here. Yeah, that's another thing. Never knew how to do building a house, but in order to finish out this shed, I had to learn everything about building a house. And so I converted this shed into an office because I got kicked out of my house when we had our third kid.
Is this the same shed that you put a roof on, or is this different?
This is a different one. Yep, learned how to
Okay.
frame a roof. Yeah, that was actually our an old coal shed. So our house is from the 1930s. It was a schoolhouse from the WPA, and they had a coal shed made out of brick. And I'd rip the roof off of that with a bulldozer because that was the only way it was coming off, and redid the trusses, manually built all the trusses and redid it and put a metal roof on it, and it was fun.
Is coal still used in your area at all to heat homes?
No,
because I've lived on the prairies almost a decade now, and when I moved, because I grew up heating with wood, right? I mean, it's huge on the East Coast, and I come out here and there's still people with coal-fired furnaces. They still have coal chutes and rooms in their basement. I mean, it is definitely in the minority at this point, but it's still something that is a thing up here. It was foreign to me at first,
Yeah, I can imagine. I can imagine. So, but yeah, no. Usually, electricity for a lot of people. Some people are wood, and some people like us. I converted over to propane a couple of years ago.
Any natural gas in your area at all?
People have it. There's actually a natural gas pipeline 5 feet in front of my in-laws' house, and they charge them $40 a month for a 5-foot pipe to a meter, and so that they can have gas. And they're like, we use like $1 of natural gas, but our bill's like $40 a month, and it's.
We're the same boat here. I love natural gas. It's cheap, but the distribution fees are more than our usage fees every month. It doesn't, but yeah. All right. So I know on your website, of course, you say you're a staunch individualist, which I totally dig. And that's my shtick too, but so for someone who's into, liberty and, individual freedom and that sort of thing, why would somebody even want to learn to build something? I mean, it's a pretty straightforward question, but what's your take on it for sure?
I actually kind of have my wife was like, I told my wife I have a little bit of a controversial opinion, and I told her, and she kind of got her hackles up a little. And it's not like it's more mental, contrarian, not political. But I believe everyone needs to learn how to make furniture, even if it's just a basic table or a basic chair, or if you want to get a little more fancy, farm style furniture, and just because it teaches you a bunch of stuff along the way. I think it teaches you project management. I was talking to you a little bit about that to you earlier. It teaches you design and project management. How do you take an idea, a concept, put it in onto paper, and then plan what you need to buy, work through the entire process, work through the build process, and then come out with a final result in the end. I mean, that from right there can build an amazing amount of self-confidence. It's also, depending on the complexity of the project, something that you can knock out pretty quick. And so there's that. Then, and then it teaches you craftsmanship. It teaches you to pay attention to precision, where a lot of people aren't put in a situation to learn any type of precision because they don't need to. And then it reinforces mathematics skills and logical thinking as well. Plus, you get to learn a little more about the environment around you, depending on how far down the rabbit hole of furniture building you go. You learn about different types of wood. You learn about wood movement. You learn about different stains and how they interact with the wood, absorption rates and things like that, and different chemicals. And so now you have some chemical analysis things going on. And then, you can move down the rabbit trail to actually aesthetics and design of where something will fit. And all of those things come from just learning how to make one piece of furniture. but it expands your mind exponentially in a sense of everything that you know. Plus you learn about structure and design of stuff. So after I started looking into woodworking, I started looking at design of furniture that we might purchase. At this point, I'll probably never purchase another piece of furniture in my life, unless we just have to, because, now I want to make it all, but I can look at something and be like, I see the problems with that now. Whereas I never would have seen it before. I actually have the confidence to actually try to figure some of this stuff out that in reality, I always would have thought you have to be some professional person that has, had decades of experience in order to make. And it's like, not really. If you take your time, you plan it, you can do some fairly complex things with just a year or two of experience. And even less if there's one guy, he's just like, I'm going to do that project. And there was some complex stuff and he just took his time and figured it out. And so I think, it's kind of like the wood shop class in high school. I think everyone should take a wood shop class, make a piece of furniture. And now you have a skill set and it expands everything. And the example I like to use as, what it can turn into is, recently bought a grill. I was telling you, like, I'm kind of a cheap person and I like value. So I bought an expensive grill that I love, but I didn't want to spend that extra $500 to get the base that you put it on. So I ordered just the grill to save money, and also convinced my wife to upgrade to the next one. But anyway, but I was like, I need a table to put this on outside. And so stopped at Home Depot on the way back from a fishing trip that I took a couple months ago. If you listen to Jack's podcast, you know about that. And picked up some 2x4s and picked up some 4x4s and gave myself 1 hour. And in 1 hour, I built a table with no plans because I had the experience to do it already. And I knew how to build something to support a few hundred pounds, and also have some structural capability there. I thought things through. And so when I didn't really have the time to build it. That's why I gave myself 1 hour. So it gave me a constraint to change how I designed something, so I didn't go overboard. And so it allowed us to save some money in a sense in there. And so
that Ken's got a question, but I was just we talked about it a little bit before there, but it's neat because, like you said, building something and being into woodworking, you can say you're a woodworker, but all different types of people can come into that, but you can also learn all these other skills that come out of it as well. Like you said, project management, math, structural design. And that's where you and our brains wouldn't necessarily get bored, because some people would just look at it and say, well, that's woodworking. I want to learn this skill and then I'm going to move on. But if you really delve into it, there's, like you said, you can go to the nth degree with what you can learn and satisfy your curiosity. I love it.
Yeah, for sure.
Ken wants to know, do you use paper or CAD program?
Both. I rough out things on paper for like 2 or 3 minutes just to kind of knock out like kind of some of the rough, like how I imagine in my brain. I imagine everything visually as I'm thinking things through. Is like, I imagine like a ball with spikes on it, and I get a piece of paper and draw it out. And so that shaves off the spikes, and then I can go in and on the CAD, and usually have done SketchUp for my design work, but have recently decided to switch over to FreeCAD because it's a parametric design CAD program similar to Fusion 360. It works well with 3D printing, but does not require a monthly subscription. Like doesn't require one. There's a guy that's trying to be a permanent developer on it, and throw him some money every now and then just to encourage more development. Which is, I think, something, if you use software that's open source and free, I recommend everyone does that at least every so often, just to kind of keep the motivation up. But and also because I have, what I was telling you earlier, I have just good enough internet. I can't do like web-based, like heavily web-based and web reliant software. It just doesn't work well. And so FreeCAD I can download and use offline. And I want to, support that community too. So yeah, I use FreeCAD.
Dan wanted to know, did you take up any upholstering along with the woodworking yet?
It's actually funny that you mentioned that, because I had a summer job doing auto upholstery growing up when I was 16 or 17. No, anyway, it doesn't matter. And so I know how to do it, but I have not done it specifically. I have watched videos on it. I don't know that I'll ever get into doing it heavily, other than just like a cushion for a chair or something. Doing the bigger stuff, the poofy stuff, I that's not the kind of furniture I personally like. So
I was going to say that's more mid-century, right? So a little bit.
yeah.
But yeah, I know I get it. But are you ever, do you have any Amish in your area at all?
We do, Scott. There's a bigger community about an hour and a half north of here. But they're all, we have actually a Mennonite community that runs a local construction company. And so we run into them every now and then.
I love we for a long time in a city just outside of where I live, they had an Amish furniture store there, and I'm obviously their stuff's pricey, but it's incredible, like how they can make some things with no, at least metal fasteners, like just all pieced together with formed wood and stuff. It blows me away.
Oh yeah. I actually, so I read a couple of books on Shaker, one like was an actual college, book on the Shaker community. And it was a fascinating read just from their history and the culture of it to better understand the basis of their furniture. And then there's another book that I read that was just all around the furniture and yeah, just like how they would do stuff, back in the, late 1800s and early 1900s, is effectively what the Amish did. And then how imprecise, all the stuff was as well. Like, a lot of, like we're getting in the age of, craftsman woodworkers, where everything is like precise and engineering woodworkers. Like we want everything to be perfect, but they didn't build perfect furniture. The ones that lasted and survived are the ones that were the best. And so like there was a lot of problems with them. And so it's kind of a fun, interesting difference between current woodworking versus historical woodworking.
And I'm going to guess you lean a little more toward the historical, or not?
Yeah. No, actually, I don't know. Like I don't have a lot of hand tools due to expense in a sense. I'm more I like technology, so don't get me wrong. And so I like doing things that make it easier. But I have a couple of hand planes that I'd like to buy and just to kind of mix in and do a few things. But I definitely have no interest in grabbing a handsaw, even if it's a really nice handsaw and ripping a board in half. It's not my wheelhouse.
I can't. Yeah, I can't even imagine. I love you were talking about the character and the change of things, because and I know, like you said, the modern mindset is like right down to the 32nd of an inch and, really fine. But there's something, it was the same as like when I first learned how to bake bread. When I first started, I wanted my bread to look like store-bought bread, and then as soon as I embraced the fact that it's going to have quirks and quarks and it's going to look funny and it's going to be uneven, but it's going to taste damn good, all of a sudden you're like, well, that's a whole nother beauty in and of itself.
For sure. It's like the bed that I built for my totally agree, Kenneth. Like totally.
Yep.
You pull it down every now and then for that one utility, and then you hang it back up because it looks awesome.
Looks really good there.
Yeah, but the loft bed that I built, like there's a few problems with it, but I was like, you know what? I built this, and I built it for my kids. And this thing is gonna last. It'll probably last longer than my kids last. Maybe not. But it's gonna last a long time. The quality is there, but it has its issues. And marker marks, unfortunately.
Are you I don't know if you're like me in this sense, but are you your own worst critic? Like, and I'm sure most artists or whatever you want to call it are, but every time you go by, do you notice that one little imperfection or something that you don't want, you wish you didn't?
Yes and no. It's one of those, like, I quickly, even in my software development, I come to the point of, it works. There's a quirk to it, but that just adds to the character. And I can't beat myself up about it. And as Steve Ramsey says, you always put the bad side to the wall.
I love that. That is perfect. That's really good. So what's your next so now is your next DIY project going to be the sawmill, or where are you heading with your DIY stuff?
Yeah, so it's going to be a mix of woodworking and homes. My next big project is going to be next spring. Currently, I've been working on a software project with Nick Ferguson in
Oh
basically in
wow.
the for the last 6 months, and I'm hoping to have that done by Christmas. I need to have that done by Christmas, not only for myself and say my sanity, but for him. And like I've just put off doing DIY stuff for several months, and it's kind of grinding on me. But I'm working on getting it done, and it's going to. But my next like smaller DIY project is to build a hydroponic system in my office. So that we
Oh,
can grow some fresh vegetables over the winter, and to start learning about just kind of hooking everything together, because the next big DIY project is a pond and aquaponics system. Fairly uh, for my house, significant sized aquaponics system. And Nick, so we're bartering. I'm doing this project for Nick, and he's going to come out and do a bunch of work with me on putting in an 8 foot by 8 foot by 5 feet deep pond in. And then it's going to go down the side of my office, between my office and my shop. I have a 10-foot alleyway, and we're going to do a greenhouse cover style over it, and do hydroponics down that, so we can grow year round, hopefully, all coming from a stocked pond. So
wow.
lots of woodworking in there, and I plan to have it all run on solar power with into a battery backup, so that if electricity goes out, which doesn't happen often but does, then I don't have to worry about finding a generator, or if I'm on vacation for a few days, I don't have to worry about it then either. And
Have you
so that
played with solar at all yet, or is that going to be new too?
um it's sort of when I went to Jack's workshop in the spring, I helped install the solar system there. It wasn't too complicated, and the
It's
math
not
wasn't
bad.
too complicated of it either. And I've talked to Sean Mills a little bit, and I was like, hey, can I send you my math at some point to make sure I build the right size system for what I need? And he's like, yeah, no problem. And so and I plan on documenting everything and putting it up on YouTube as tutorial videos too. So that'll be a lot of fun.
I want to back up real quick too, because you mentioned your brain getting a little worn out from doing so much coding and that sort of thing. And
Mhm.
something we talked about before we went on air was what the rejuvenating factor of working hard.
Mhm.
Do you want to talk about that? I loved your thoughts on it and how you kind of, we talked about burnout and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, I mean, as a software developer, like I literally sit behind a desk 8 hours a day plus, and right now, I mean, I'm sitting behind a desk, 12 to 15 hours a day doing this project plus my day job. And so, I don't know, something about being at a desk, or just doing, little projects here and there. The world has a way of intruding on your brain and staying there,
Hmm.
but something about getting out and doing physical labor that hurts and that you hate, and that you're swearing at it the entire time in your head, maybe sometimes not in your head, where you cut yourself, you're sweating like crazy, and you hate the work in the moment. But that's what your brain is completely consumed by in that moment. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced, you're digging a hole and you're like, I
Oh
hate this
yes.
hole, but you need the hole. And you're thinking slow because you're so hot and just tired. And I don't know what it is, but getting into that moment, it erases everything for that few hours. And after you're done with the work, and when you're sitting there with, in my case, a Diet Coke in your hand, staring at the stuff that you just did. Um, yeah. Yeah, nice. And it just, all the problems that you've been dealing with, they just kind of go away. And you're like, why was I worried about that stuff? Grieving family as well. That to me, that has helped with that as well. Those problems, you're like, that this stuff didn't really matter. Not as much as I thought it did, because it weighed on me over time. And so just something about hard physical work is very rejuvenating, to the mind and soul, at least for me. And I've noticed it for a few other people as well. And so
I think it's a lost art, maybe, or something that not everyone maybe necessarily does at this point. But I was thinking back when you're talking about it, and this summer I did a big sod job, and it was one of the hottest days of the summer, and my worker ended up not being able to come because he had to work somewhere else. And I remember just hating it in the moment, but at the end of the day, your body hurts. Your feet hurt, your back hurts, your eyes are sore, everything, right? And you're dirty from head to toe. But there is absolutely something refreshing, and I think you're right. You lose all the stress of life in that moment, right? And then all of a sudden it gives you some perspective. I love that. And we were talking about it earlier, and I had to get you to share because what is that, modern philosophy or something? But you're absolutely right. There is something rejuvenating about hard work, even though you're beat when you're done, eh?
Yeah. And then you sleep really great that night, unless you work too hard and are too sore.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, that's what a chiropractor's for sometimes. But
right. Yeah.
So how do you recommend people get started? Like, say somebody comes to you and they're like, "All right, buddy," and I always feel funny calling people buddy because everybody's buddy guy or whatever, right? But all right, buddy. So I really know nothing. Where do I start?
Yeah. So I'd like to someday have some sort of curriculum, but at this point, I don't know when that would be, because a lot of stuff to learn and do. But what I do recommend is I think it's The Weekend Woodworker by Steve Ramsey. It's really it's how I got started. It's how a friend of mine kind of got started. It's their basic projects that you can do. He breaks it out. It's like, pick off 6 weekends and you just do this project, one each weekend. And there's something it kind of breaks it out. Like, if you'll spend, Saturday doing this part, you can spend Sunday doing this part. And by the end of the weekend, you have a completed project of furniture that looks nice. And it runs you through all of the skills that you need for the most part to do most woodworking that you need to do when it comes to, basic furniture stuff. And I was like, I get in my head that I have to do things a very specific way, and drives my wife nuts, but I am who I am. And so I was like, well, I am not going to do any other projects until I do all of Steve Ramsey's work projects. And so that's why it took me a year to build a cube system for my wife. But I went through and I built all but the last one. The last one I didn't end up building because it just didn't fit furniture wise for our house, and I couldn't come up with a tweak that my wife liked. And I was like, at this point, I know how to do that, so I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to move on. But going through the process of doing the other stuff, like, it taught me all of the basics of woodworking. And I even I forced myself to go through the stuff that I already knew and had already figured out, just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And so that's really where I recommend, starting out. He focuses specifically on the very, very beginner woodworker. So much so, he doesn't buy fancy tools, fancy power tools. I have better power tools than he has at this point, because he wants to be approachable to beginners. So that's where I recommend people start.
So, of course, I love talking about tools, and this wasn't one of the questions we talked about earlier, but since you talk about where to start and what to start with, what would you recommend? Like, if you wanted to just get into woodworking, what's the bare basics that somebody needs to get started? I know, put you on the spot. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I'd recommend probably a circular saw at the very least, and a drill, maybe a driver, kind of like just for the convenience factor, and a good tape measure. Like, I can't stress a good tape measure enough. And then probably a miter saw after that. Just more convenience, and you can get a really cheap miter saw on Craigslist, and that'll get you by for a really long time. I think after that, you'd be surprised how far you can get with just those few things. And so you don't really need a table saw to begin with. It just makes life a whole heck of a lot easier. Like I decided, because I'm dumb, and I want to take a lot of extra time to do a project where the only thing I use is a circular saw. So I'm like laying that board up there, and clamps. Can't ever have enough.
Yes.
And I clamped it down, got everything lined up. I probably spent 20 minutes lining up for a perfectly straight cut with a circular saw. You can do it. My table saw, that would take me 3 minutes. And and that's with turning the table saw on. And so
I got rid of my table saw recently because it was a great big old cast iron one. And I honestly used it 4 or 5 times a year. And what happened was I was moving it all the time. It was always in the way in the shop. So I said, forget it. And now I use the clamp method because I'm not a high-end woodworker. For me, like ripping plywood and stuff like that, I can easily do at this point with a straight edge, and but I get it. Yeah. Ken asked, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, as for my favorite tool, man, I don't know. Probably the table saw. I mean, I have a nice saw stop table saw. After I cut my finger, I was like, I'm gonna get a saw stop, and and so I like to use that. And I went ahead and got the 3 horsepower professional cabinet saw, and so it cuts like butter. And have
you ever tripped the saw stop yet, or luckily not?
Nope. There was a couple of points where I thought the material was going to be too wet that it would trip. But my fingers, I bought a bunch of safety stuff, and like I bought 2 micro jig grippers. I am super duper careful. I still have all 10 digits, and so
nice.
But right here, the saw went right down right there. So fun times. I have a story. That I learned my lesson, and that's why I don't use the unisaw anymore. And
when I worked selling building supplies, I did them quick, back of the napkin math one time, but about 25% of our contractors were missing a portion of 1 digit. And I just thought, but John says you need 15 good tape measures so you can always find one.
Yeah. Yep. For sure.
Was it you in the collab video we did earlier? Was this year that? Yeah. Share about that tape measure, because I still haven't got it, but I friggin' love that thing.
Yeah, that's the fast cap tape measure. Some of the great features is the clip on the back. So growing up, I remember, and even not necessarily growing up, you have the back clip. It's just kind of a pain to put it on your pants or put it on whatever. Well, the fast cap guys are like, you know what? Why don't we add a little piece to the top of the clip so you can have leverage, and then you can just leverage it open, put it on whatever. I put it on my apron, and so I just click, done, and you never miss almost. It also has a pad,
scratch
of paper
pad
on the side, that you can write on it. And because oftentimes I'm on the other side of my property, and I'm like, I need a 4 foot, 6.5 inch board. And by the time you walk all the way back and you get everything set up, you don't remember that. And so you just write it down real fast and then erase it. And then it also has, in most tape measures, they have the numbers on both sides, but like the numbers on one side there's less of them and there's less tick marks. They mirror it on both sides so that you can read it upside down and you can read it up like that too. And
nice.
And then it also has a rubbery case to it, so you get a better grip on it as well. So I really like that. And it has a textured tape, so it's not smooth. So you have better grip on it whenever you're kind of grabbing it. And then it has 2 locking mechanism. So do you ever, you're pulling the tape and you're like, I don't need to like lock it, but I need to kind of push down on it just enough to get pressure to stop it.
Yep.
So on this one, they have a button underneath that does that so that you don't accidentally keep clicking it too far with the top button. And so you don't click it too far. And then, you know, also kind of wind down, like wear down that grab portion so that it winds anyway, so that it just makes it a little worse. And it has a pencil sharpener. Thank you, Mills. Yeah.
And
yeah,
I'm not sure.
Use that too.
I'm not sure. I think that's a question from Ken, or maybe it's a statement. But either way, I'm curious. Does it clean off easy? Like you know, where your scratch pad, like where you put your.
I haven't had a problem with it with a normal eraser on a pencil. It hasn't been an issue, I've noticed.
Because ever since I saw your tape measure like that. So one day I was up to the top of the peak and I was getting ready to measure an angle for my vinyl siding, and I got up there, realized I'm not going to remember this by the time I get down the 24-foot ladder in the heat. I thought, I remember Buddy. Anyway, so I flipped my Fat Max over. I don't use a clip. I put mine in the pocket. I can't stand anything on my belt. So I take my clips off. So on the back of the Fat Max, it's nice and wide and yellow. So I started using that as my little scratch pad, and it worked pretty good, you know?
Nice. Yeah,
no, all thanks to you.
Awesome. Hey, glad I helped somebody. That's why I do what I do, is I want to help other people learn from my problems. But I use an apron for most of my work. When I was doing the roof rebuild, I was like, man, like an apron is awkward in this build. So I really wished I had a belt. And so I kind of looked at belts every now and then. I'll probably get one before I do the project this summer. But there's just so, like, got to research everything. There's just so many features, and you're like, I don't know what I need. You know, that's where I just, sometimes I'm like, analysis paralysis, I'll buy that one.
You know, so that's, I was, okay, I'm not a belt guy, as you can just imagine, right? I hate belts. I've never, anyway. And one day we were in Lowe's and my wife's like, I said, I think I want a tool belt. She said, no, I mean, not that she didn't want to get me one, but she knew I wouldn't wear it. And out of spite, I said I might, you know, and I ended up getting an AWP. I bought a nylon one because I knew leather would be hot, and, you know, I wanted something fabricy. Well, I wanted to, that's changed my life. I'm not kidding. Like, just, you know, one of them things that just changes your life just a little bit. But I mean, literally having, anytime I ever worked on a project before, it was, okay, where'd I set my square? Where's my pencil? There's my tape measure. Okay, 5 steps this way. Well, I know it's simple, and I know contractors do it all the time, but for a little old handyman, I never really seen the need. Well, now I do. So yeah, it's worth it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Because like I have a, woodpecker's delve square.
Okay.
It's a little pricey, but it's nice. So if we're doing just the woodworking in the shop, and I keep that in my apron right here because I'm pulling it out all the time. And when I occasionally, I'll be marking something and I'll set it to the side, and I'll spend the next 10 minutes looking for it, because by the time I'm ready to look for it, it's not at that spot anymore. And so I built the muscle memory. As soon as I'm done, it goes right back in that spot. And I actually want to modify my my apron to add a couple of other things that I'm frequently grabbing too. And so, yeah.
And that tape measure, just in case anybody's on the audio podcast, that's the fast cap, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. I had somebody, who was that? Dan was asking in the comments there, and I just figured I'd get it out there. And Dan says he has an AWP farmer's rig. It's a really good setup, and I like them. They're modular a little bit too. Like the back piece of the belt is Velcro, so you can take pieces off or slide it around. And it's, nice. I really like it. Like, it's, yeah. And it wasn't expensive. Like,
okay,
if it was $50 Canadian, maybe.
Okay.
I don't think, yeah. So that's like $12 American. No, but yeah.
I mean, that's probably, yeah. Again, if something's worth the value, then I'll moan and groan about it, but I'll still buy it. There's a guy on Instagram that I follow, Zach Builds, and he does construction stuff during the day and furniture work at night, and he really likes AWP stuff. Yeah,
I came across it just on a whim. It was just kind of the same with my DeWalt knee pads I bought. And everybody who follows me, they know I like DeWalt, but I didn't want something heavy. I didn't want foam per se. So I went with like this kind of nylon-y thing.
Mhm.
And again, I turned 40 this year, so I figured I should probably start wearing knee pads, and they're great. I don't know why I've spent my entire life crawling around on my knees without knee pads, but we're just stubborn, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's why I hate breaking down plywood, is crawling around on the ground. And finally got a track saw, so that should make it go a lot
Oh,
faster. I got
that's an investment.
Yeah, a friend of mine decided to upgrade to Festool for several things, and so he sold me his Craig track saw for a good price. So
You just those are two words that Joseph Millis Construction there. He's a big Festool fan, so
gotcha.
he always likes. He does a lot. If you ever check out his channel, you want to see some good reviews. He does a lot of that stuff, and
Awesome.
Knipex, and like a lot of the more expensive high end hand tools and things. But yeah, it's really
Oh, they are nice. I haven't figured out how to justify it, because that's the thing, is I like to buy stuff, but I have to justify it. So it's like I have wanted a quadcopter to do photography stuff for years, so I've been able to figure out how to justify it.
I understand. I know. And we talked about this earlier too. I get into hobbies and then I kind of drop them like a bad habit sometimes. And I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you're going to stick with something before you invest in it too, right?
Yeah, sure.
It's hard. Like, I got a 3D printer that I played with last winter for like 3 months, and I was so excited, and it's literally collected dust since last April, and I might get back to it, but for now,
I like to figure out how can I integrate them all. How can I make them all mutually support each other? So like I was, I like photography, but I don't. I do have that, like, I like photography for the sake of photography because there's a very technical side to it and it's a lot of fun. But at the end of the day, like, I like practical things. I like teaching people. I like instructing people. And so I'm like, well, I can use that photography knowledge to make good looking tutorials and, do stuff better, and so that, I have good quality equipment to do all of that stuff. And so like, that's a way I can integrate it, and I can still scratch that itch, and still continue. The same thing with the 3D printing is I have a couple of ideas for products. One is actually to fix a tool. And so I want to print something that's out of manufacture, and, I'll just throw it up to sell to other people. And, and then there's a few other things that I want to make and sell from the 3D printing perspective. And so, one of the ways I like to justify stuff, is how can I integrate it to help me move my craft forward. And so
that's cool. I make it part of the system, and also make it pull its own weight. Hey, like make you a little bit of money or something along the way.
Yes. Yep.
So we haven't really talked a whole lot about, but you have a podcast, hey?
Yes.
Yeah. I love the name. The name's pretty good. So
yeah, well, it's about to change. So
is it?
I haven't told anyone. It's only changing slightly. I haven't told anyone. I've hinted at it in my podcast, but it's going to be Buddy Builds. Still the same Buddy, but builds onto it. I've liked the name Buddy. But when you say Buddy, you're like, you don't know that I mean BUD-DIY. And so I
get it.
Constantly have to say BUD-DIY. Visit me at buddy.net, BUD-DIY.net, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and so when I was at the Survival Podcast workshop, I was kind of lamenting that I have this thing and, I'm just stuck with it. And he's like, well, Buddy Builds. And I'm like, literally the everyone there was just like, yeah, I think that's your new name.
Was it Jack? Did Jack come up with that?
No, it was another, Eric Myers, I think.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Go ahead. Sorry.
And it was just one of those off the cuff random things. Like, it wasn't even like he was putting a ton of thought into it. It was just like, there. And I was like, okay. So in the new year, I'm going to convert over to buddybuilds.net. Somebody has buddybuilds.com, and so I'm like, and he won't sell it. I did the little like domain agent, thing where you try to convince a broker to try to convince them to, and I haven't done it. So it's going to be buddybuilds.net. And I have I have Buddy BUDDY builds.net and Buddy BUDDIY builds.net.
Oh, good.
So that they both will redirect to everything properly. And so got to work on branding. Branding is important. And
Branding's tough, eh?
yeah. And so I think that's going to solve some problems for me.
Mm-hmm.
But the main, like when you see it, when you go to the site, will still be the BUD DIY. Because I really like it, but it's just going to have builds on it. And so, but yeah, it's going back, I'm sure, to your original of the podcast. It's branding again and like focus. I am not an expert at any of this stuff. Up until 3 years ago, I didn't want to have anything to do with DIY. You could talk to my wife about that, and she's bummed that I wouldn't want to do projects around the house. Literally, we would have discussions. And, you know, growing up, she's like, she imagined her dad, you know, everyone marries their dad, you know, and she imagined, you know, her husband would want to do projects around the house. And I didn't want to do projects. I wanted to program. I wanted to be on my computer. I wanted to do those things. And so, oh crap, I lost my train of thought.
You're just talking about not being able to, how you well, you're talking about your podcast and
yeah. And so since I don't, in a sense, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm learning as I go, my focus in the podcast and on my channel and the stuff that I create is the journey. I want to document the journey that I go through. That's why I have set up, you know, I have segments in my podcast. What happened this week? What did I do? The main segment where, you know, it's either the project that I did, breaking it down, or some, you know, some tutorial type thing to teach other people. And then my failure of the week. I mean, that's, you know, because I learn from other people's mistakes. I feel like I have bypassed a lot of problems in my life by listening to other people's mistakes and not doing those. And so I look at that as kind of the journey of learning. And then, you know, as I build more content on YouTube, it's going to be the same thing. YouTube and Odyssey I want to show that journey of me not knowing what I'm doing and teaching the person that's 6 months behind me while still learning from the people that are 6 months plus ahead of me and going across that journey. That's what I did with my programming site that I was telling you about before we got on. Is I did that same thing. I had a little more expertise on that. And so I knew exactly where I wanted to nail in the teaching aspect. But it was still kind of that journey. And, but at the end of the day, the thing that I want to do, I make a lot of mistakes and I do things difficult. I make things difficult in how I learn them. And I want to take those problems and not have other people go through those problems. I want to consolidate the information. I'm writing a book on raising chickens. And I write it while I'm doing the initial stages of the chickens. So the only thing that I'm talking about is brooding chickens and that stage, because that was the thing I was most concerned about. So I want to writing a small little 30-40 page book that's only about getting your chickens to pasture. And that's it. Like from getting them to pasture. I'm not going to talk about anything else. And so, because all that information was spread out everywhere and I felt overly complex.
You're not going to fill it with 150 extra pages of fluff like every other author?
There will be fluff in there, obviously. But yeah,
but
not
seriously.
Yeah.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so that's my goal. And that's the orientation that I'm going through. And I've been hitting it around in my head more lately, the kind of the format that I want to go through and I want to attempt as long form content. So, again, that formula I was telling you about to before we were talking, to get a lot of viewers fast, you need 10 to 15 minute videos, highly precise and very entertaining. Like you can build fast, but what I want to teach. And so I want to do longer content. If I have a 40-minute video, then I have a 40-minute video. You know, if I have a 10-minute video, then I have a 10-minute video. I mean, some of my podcasts are almost an hour long. Last week's was an hour long, but it was talking about something that was important about finance and farms, you know, and so it was an hour long. This week, it was talking about me putting a vanity in. So it was 23 minutes long. And so like, I don't care. I want the knowledge to get out. And that's kind of my goal. And so hopefully it pays off.
It will. And people, I get it. Like you look at so many of the people on YouTube that blew up quick and or even still blown up, and they they're almost a caricature of a personality. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but like you said, like, it needs to be entertaining or hyper entertaining even. And it's okay. But if, you know, again, we talked about this a little before we come on the air, but people like to hear our journey. And if we're going to share what we're learning and our personality type and our beliefs are going to come through in that, it may take a little longer to build a community around that, but the community you build around it is going to be loyal and is going to be interested in what you have to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I am not a person. I don't have an amazing personality. There's a YouTuber, Instagrammer, Bourbon Moth. This guy has charisma and personality oozing out of every which direction. And he exploded almost overnight. I mean, he was like almost literally the overnight success. Like, but he capitalized on that personality. Now he has a YouTube channel and he builds stuff for celebrities, and that's his full, he was a full-time woodworker, and he takes risks too. But I'm not oozing personality. I am a fairly dry person with a twist.
But I always say, like, my ideal audience member is almost me, or at least somebody a few months behind my journey. You know what I mean? And that's okay, because people who are like you are going to be drawn to you, or people who want to know more. You know what I mean? So, and there is a place for all of us, all the crazies and all the normals, and, the guys with the eccentric personalities and the guys who you'd rather, I don't know, sit in the backyard and have a beer or a piece of fried chicken with, right? Like there's room for everybody. And I don't care what anybody says, as far as YouTube goes, it's the biggest platform in the world, and there's still room for new creators and people to do whatever they want to do.
Yeah, because as new people onboard and start like getting up success, the older people, quote unquote, they're dropping off. Like they're losing their effect and their effectiveness and their reach, and in cases they're just stopping, and they're like, I did what I did, I got where I got, and I'm done.
They're bored. Yeah. Or they're moving on to bigger, they're going to go box instead,
Exactly. And so, or me, like I was a software developer, have a really great career, and now I don't want to do software development anymore. I mean, there's a lot of reasons in that, but I want to go in this other, I want to teach something, but I don't want to be a high school teacher.
I get it.
Like, so it's kind of the transition. And so, as the other people, as they drop off and they fade in a sense, I'm going to come into that next little bit, and
that's okay.
And that there's just, I think that works on that, same thing. So I was one of the pioneers in my particular framework and language, doing screencasts. That's what they were called back then. They weren't YouTube videos. But I was kind of one of the pioneers that stuck with it. I did it for 5 or 6 years, 6 years. And, minor celebrity in that world. Let me tell you, if you ever go to a conference and everyone knows your name, it freaks you out the first time you experience it. Because you will have somebody yell at you across the room and you're like, what did I do? Anyway. And so, as I dropped off, other people picked it up and moved. I have a friend that he did it in the Rails community, programming wise. And like, one guy dropped off and he picked up the mantle and he moved it forward, and that, that opened the door for other people as well. And so like, I don't necessarily see it as a problem, like everyone's like market saturation. And it's like,
I don't think so. Not,
yeah.
I don't want 1 million subscribers. I mean, hey, whatever, you know what I mean? But
I'm not going to turn it down.
No, but I'm okay with, a niche audience, you know what
with
I mean?
1,000 true fans.
Yeah. So we've been yammering on here, but speaking of the community, there's a ton of stuff here. I wanted to, did you see this little tip about painter's tape on a measuring tape?
That's a great idea. And that would be great for all of my Harbor Freight tape measures I leave laying around the house.
Absolutely. Yeah. I got to, I'm going to try it. I think that's awesome. I would. Yeah. And then Ken says, check out the You Are the Brand podcast. Really great stuff on personal branding.
Totally will. Because that branding is still something I continue to work on learning about. Because it's fascinating. I also like business. I like everything almost.
I know you do.
But I like business. I mean, I read nonfiction all the time, and I go through waves. And business is one of those things. It's like business models are interesting. You know, I was like, I don't understand this accounting stuff, so I went and bought a book on the history of accounting. Not the most humorous subject in the world, but it gave some interesting insights into where it came from. So now I better understand what it is now. And so I will definitely check that podcast out.
Yeah, me too. I branding. Yeah. I just laugh when you talk, because there's so much that you do just is so much just like me. But this summer I listened to the 4-Hour Work Week and Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I just worked my way through all that. And I was in that mindset for a solid, maybe 2 months. There was a book called The Perfect Week. And I just digested everything I could. And then, okay, I've got it. And now it's all kind of bouncing around back there. And then it's time to go on to the next thing, you know?
And you're sick of it. You're sick of business books for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
I've been on a Christian history kick for the last 6 weeks, and
cool.
Every book I can get a hold of, like I just listen to it and read it, and I can tell I'm at that point when I get done with the next book that I'm done for a while, and in a year I'll pick it up again, you know, because I'll hear something and it'll be like, oh yeah, you know, and so yeah, I totally get it.
I do that with fiction. I go fiction for a while, and then I'm like, whew, I got to get back in the nonfiction, you know, and it goes back and forth. But Joseph said, I think all of us YouTubers try hard to do that. Having friends do the same thing can really help get you encouraged. And that goes back a little ways, but it's just talking about, you know, being successful and branding and sharing, you know. But and then Joseph also said, Think Media said your vibe attracts your tribe.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Because like I said, your ideal audience member, your ideal community member is basically who you are. You know, if you look at my YouTube analytics, you know, the people are North American males, 35 to 55, you know, and that, what am I, a North American male, 35 to 55, right?
Well, so to be fair, most of YouTube is a North American male, 35.
Well, that is true. Yes. But I hope that I hope they're attracted to my, you know, I think that's how it goes, right? We get out there and we're like, okay, this is who I am. And I don't know if you found this as well, but for me, it's taken a while to really be who I am, you know, like to come out of, you start out kind of reserved and, you know, and that isn't really who I am. You know what I mean? If you know me in regular life, but then as you get more and more comfortable, things get a little more comfortable and you hit your stride eventually, you know?
Right. Yeah. I'm kind of the same way. I have learned to, this isn't the best way to put it, but I've learned to put on the act long enough to get to pull myself out of the shell in a sense.
Yeah.
So like when I would go to a conference or when I go to the TSP workshops, like I have to act like who I am for probably half an hour until I'm finally comfortable with myself being in that situation. And then, you know, my full personality comes out in a sense.
But it's not fake. You're just, you have to find yourself, you know what I mean? Like
I have to force it for a little bit because the natural side of me is, can I just go sit in my truck for the next couple of days? So, you know, even though I know it, like pushing myself to go talk to the people that I know, you know, or pushing myself to jump in on the project and start working on it, even though like I would rather, like, I don't want to, you know, rock any boats in a sense, you know, like you have to put it. It's like everything. Once you get started, it's a lot easier. And so I push myself to get started. And so, yeah.
I get it. Like human nature is almost to stay in one spot, you know, but once you overcome inertia, is that the right? Anyway, you know, and then you get going, it's very easy to continue that progress, but it's that, like you said, and even though I'm a little more extrovert. I am a bit of an introvert too. And there's, like you said, there's times when, it's people, people you love, people you like to spend time with,
Mhm.
but there's still that part in the back of your brain that's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm good. I'll
Oh,
just stay. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, even when I'm around people that I know, it's like sometimes I need like 5 minutes in the bathroom to just decompress for a moment and
Hmm.
recharge my brain and then get back out there and go at it again. I am just naturally an introvert, and it's funny because at church I gave up and we gave a testimony, and my wife, and I told my wife I would do it, and like you know did this eloquent speech, and my pastor's wife came up to my wife, was like, I didn't know he could speak so good, and he's like, that's my husband, that's who I talk to every day, but he just doesn't talk when he's
Hmm.
around a lot of other people, and it's like, my wife's like, why don't you talk to him? And I'm like, because I like to talk about the things I like to talk about, and I don't like to talk about things I don't like to talk about, and so I don't talk about it, and so anyway.
Oh, it's all right. We've set a record. This is 90 minutes. I think it's my longest interview yet, which is an awesome sign. You know what I mean? But
Oh, for sure.
but we've kept people. But maybe I'm going to try to wrap her up a little bit here. So tell me, I mean, we could talk all night, and I'll have to have you on again because this was great.
Oh, for sure.
You're
Yeah,
a
I'm enjoying it.
you're a kindred soul, so I appreciate that. But so where can we find you? What are you up to? The whole shebang.
Yeah, so you could find me at buddy.net, buddiy.net. See that branding
I
thing
love
there?
it. Hmm.
And so you can find me there. That's the main website. From there, I link out everywhere. But I'm on YouTube. I'm on Odyssey. Everything under Buddy. And then I am on Instagram. I've been on there longer, trying to figure myself out there. So it's Buddy Lindsey Jr. on there.
Yep.
And so those are the main places. And Float is Buddy, and MeWe I think is Buddy Lindsey. I don't remember. I am terrible right now at social media because of this project, and because I've been trying to, while I worked on this project, since I've only focused only on the podcast and not any of the other stuff that I want to do. I have had extra time to just kind of like think about direction.
Mhm.
And so I've not done a lot of social media. So I will jump onto that more in the new year with a new strategy and a new focus. And so those are the places to kind of go away. But for now, I post to YouTube. I record videos of my podcast so that I can post those on YouTube. It syncs to Odyssey. And I put the audio version in Libsyn for podcast syndication, and put the link on the website so that it's cross post everywhere, so that it's easily accessible. And so that's the best way, buddiy.net. And from there, you can find me everywhere else.
Perfect. Well, anything else you wanted to share before we call her a night, buddy? I always call you buddy. Anyway.
Yeah, no, just if hope to see you all around, and hopefully there was something in here y'all learned. That's, to me, that's what's important, is to help other people learn stuff, and that's why I do what I do.
That was awesome. Thank you very much. And if you want to hang around for just a second, I'll close up and we can chat right quick before I go off, if you got just a minute.
Sure, sounds good.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. We'll see you in just a minute. All right, guys. Well, that was incredible. It's definitely a new record for length of a podcast. Yeah, I want to say sorry for going so long, but I'm not going to, because it was just too damn of a good interview. So anyway, you guys check out buddiy.net. He's got some awesome content. And yeah, let's close her up there, guys. I appreciate you guys. I know you can spend your time anywhere, and you choose to come hang out in the workshop with me. So thank you. And as always, stay happy, stay healthy, and have a great week.